In today's video, we'll show you new striking moments of how Russia continues to lose dozens of tanks, armored vehicles, and other equipment on the battlefield. We'll also highlight how the Ukrainian Air Force, operating in extremely risky conditions, delivers powerful strikes and destroys some of the enemy's most fortified positions. However, despite the highly successful operations of the Ukrainian military command, the Russians continue to launch numerous assaults on a daily basis. Their activity is especially high in the Donetsk direction. Despite the lack of weapons, FPV drones remain Ukraine's most effective defense. The Russians managed to scatter in different directions to be able to maneuver more effectively against the drones. But they didn't anticipate the number of pilots holding the defense here. As soon as the vehicles came within striking range, dozens of kamikaze drones took off, each targeting its own objective. And these pilots know how to hunt the enemy. The first tank has been successfully destroyed and another one is on the way. After 2 direct hits, the fire engulfed the Russian tank so quickly that the crew didn't have time to evacuate. The soldiers inside the armored vehicle were lucky to escape before retribution reached them, but can such an outcome really be called luck? Another APC tried to flee the battlefield, and it almost succeeded. But one of the Ukrainian drones caught up with it right after the turn and damaged its track. And after the target stopped, finishing it off became much easier. The drone successfully flew inside through the open hatch and caused a powerful explosion. And a few seconds later, the ammunition exploded as well. And even the second explosion wasn't the last one. This time, the Ukrainians managed to hit a vehicle carrying a large amount of highly flammable materials. The Russians have barely changed their tactics since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Their main strategy is to win through sheer numbers. They attack the same section again and again, and over time, they eventually achieve the desired result. But not this time. These Ukrainian positions have almost turned into graveyards of Russian equipment, yet they still hold strong. Give a thumbs up for the bravery of the Ukrainian military, who are holding the line daily against a much larger enemy. The Ukrainian pilots had to chase this tank for a while. For some time, the tank managed to escape from the drone, but not for long. This time, the target was stopped with the first hit. However, we don't see smoke or fire, so it's possible that the tank stopped not due to damage, but because the crew simply abandoned it and fled in panic. But in reality, the reason it stopped doesn't matter much. The only important thing is that it made it easier to destroy it completely. It's not very often that a tank or armored vehicle can be taken out with just a couple of drones, so this case can be considered a great success. But maybe it's not just about the tank and luck. There are certain locations where destroyed equipment keeps appearing on different days. It might seem like these places are cursed, but there's probably nothing mystical about it. Most likely, it's simply because this spot has long been under Ukrainian control, and the military knows exactly how to target it and defend this area effectively. New footage of destroyed tanks and armored vehicles appears daily, but seeing a strike on an enemy MLRS is much rarer. These military systems operate far from the front lines, and hitting them, especially with an FPV drone, is an exceptional achievement. Usually, when an FPV drone hits an MLRS, the ammunition detonates immediately. However, this time, the Russians managed to drive away from their position and abandon the vehicle before the next drone ultimately finished the hunt. Additional anti-drone protection helped this tank withstand the first strike, giving the crew some time to evacuate. However, the first hit left a perfect hole in the shield, just enough for the next drone operator to effectively complete the mission. This tank is still in relatively good condition, and the target needs to be quickly finished off before the Russians manage to tow it for repairs. The Ukrainians act swiftly and waste no time. Thanks to the drone flying directly inside the tank, a single explosion was enough to turn an almost intact vehicle into a heap of burning scrap metal. Now, the Russians definitely have no reason to try and save it, and its comrade seems to understand this well. Instead, it quickly changes course and starts fleeing in another direction to avoid sharing the fate of its fallen ally. But it's already being awaited. The first strike deals enough damage to halt its escape. The crew realizes that their journey is likely over and abandons the tank under heavy drone attacks. Despite the fact that this tank's anti-drone protection was visually minimal, its armor proved to be quite strong. To start a fire, the Ukrainians had to use 4 kamikaze drones. Only after that did the tank finally ignite. In the end, the explosion of the ammunition completely justified all the effort spent. At the end of March, the number of combat engagements increased again. The Russians are not giving up their attempts to capture as much territory as possible. And judging by the number of daily assaults, they have no plans to stop. In March, the Russian army lost an average of about 10 tanks, 30 armored vehicles, and over 100 light vehicles per day. These are very large numbers, but even they are not enough to make Russia stop. In the same month, according to the Ukrainian General Staff, Russia lost around 40,000 soldiers. This tank was unlucky enough to hit Ukrainian mines 3 times in a row, and although it proved to be quite resilient, it was more than enough to stop the tank, but not to destroy it. He managed to drive a little further, but then the left track finally broke apart, and the crew had to abandon the tank in the middle of the road. The first FPV drone failed to inflict significant damage on the tank itself, but managed to breach the anti-drone protection for its counterpart. The second and third drones were able to inflict enough damage to ensure that this tank would never pose a threat to the Ukrainian army again. A column of Russian tanks advanced and quickly spread out along different roads and directions to avoid a massive strike. The first one from this group to have bad luck was this tank. Ukrainian pilots caught up with it at the very beginning and successfully took it out of action. The first strike significantly damaged and stopped it, while the next drone was able to approach more precisely and finish off the target. His teammate managed to escape a little further. It seems like this tank didn't even feel the first strike of the kamikaze drone and simply continued charging at full speed towards the Ukrainian positions. But then a mine is encountered in its path, and within a few seconds it stops and explodes from inside. Nearby, another tank desperately attempts to break through Ukrainian defensive positions, but immediately encounters strong resistance. Damaged and burning, it veers off the road and tries to rush through a field. However, this only worsens its situation. It gets stuck in the middle of the field, fully exposed to drone strikes. And of course, that's exactly what happened. The pilot couldn't ignore such an attractive target. But this is not the end. On the same stretch of land, another tank tries to do what his comrades couldn't. He even notices where the drone is coming from and quickly turns around. It attempts to dodge the attacks, but the FPV drones are much more mobile than the large and unwieldy tank. After several hits, the tank driver probably realized that their plan had no chance of succeeding, and in panic, he attempted to flee. But he ended up getting tangled in the defensive barbed wire. The crew even managed to survive the attack and quickly abandon the tank, which would no longer be able to move. But on the same spot, the next day, another target gets stuck. In these frames, you can see how, thanks to the skilled actions of artillery reconnaissance, a Russian Buk M1 air defense system with its ammunition was detected and destroyed while on the move. Another rare beast has been eliminated. Every piece of enemy equipment taken out before it can carry out its mission means fewer threats to Ukrainian forces and civilians. It's not just about numbers. It's about saving lives and weakening the enemy's ability to sustain their offensives. Passenger cars are a very fast and mobile means of transport, but due to the lack of proper protection, they are most often destroyed with the first hit. These scenes sometimes look no less epic than the explosions of tanks or APCs. These Russians were transporting some very dangerous cargo, and as soon as they noticed the danger, they immediately ran as far away from the vehicle as possible, and that was the right decision. Another victory, another disrupted plan of the occupiers. Every destroyed logistical chain complicates their operations and brings Ukraine closer to victory. Despite the fact that Ukraine does not have many fighter jets, they successfully carry out missions along the entire front line. Recently, impressive footage has emerged showing Ukrainian aviation using guided bombs to destroy an important bridge that was providing logistical support for the Russian army. Destroying a bridge located deep in enemy territory is extremely difficult, and such operations are highly risky. That's why footage of them rarely appears online. However, some of these operations look truly impressive. But besides bridges, there are many other targets that can be effectively destroyed by guided bombs, such as these Russian fortifications. The bombs hit their target precisely, completely destroying everything that was on these positions. This precise strike effectively destroyed another enemy position. According to intelligence data, an ammunition depot and a significant number of Russian soldiers were located here. Guided aerial bombs are a very powerful weapon for destroying even the most fortified positions. In this video, we can see how a JDAM-ER successfully penetrates the defenses and destroys a Russian bunker where soldiers were located. The aerial bombs pierced through the layer of earth and exploded right inside the bunker. This time, the risk was fully justified. Mission accomplished.